So welcome to another episode of Feature Fridays, and today again I'm joined by Romain. So Romain, if you just mind introducing yourself again for those who haven't seen the previous Feature Friday.
Yeah. Hey, Guy. Thanks for having me today. My name is Romain Decker, and I'm a staff technical product manager at VMware.
Thanks, Romain. And for those who don't know me, my name is Guy Bartram. I'm the product marketing manager for the Cloud Director suite of products. And today we're talking about a really important update actually for service providers. We've been moving from NSX-V to NSX-T, and there's also another move from the NSX Load Balancer that was included in V to now the new Avi-based load balancer, or NSX Advanced Load Balancer, I believe it's called. So we're going to cover some of the capabilities of that product, some of the nuances of the product, how it fits into a VCD environment, and hopefully have a bit of a demo, right?
Yeah, we prepared something.
Okay, so let's just start with, could you kind of explain why Avi Load Balancer, I'm going to call it Avi Load Balancer for this session because it's just easier to distinguish it. Can you tell me why it's different to the traditional load balancer that we had before?
Yeah, sure. Let me just share my screen quickly, and I will explain at the same time.
Okay. Perfect.
And yeah, so previously, historically, we had NSX-V, and we had this concept of edge services gateway where we had these load balancing features. And when we developed NSX-T, we ported these features into NSX-T. But last year we acquired Avi, and their product is very powerful, and they have a lot of experience in just providing load balancing, global load balancing in web application firewall. That's one of the reasons that why we are shifting from the load balancer on NSX-T to the NSX-ALB, so Advanced Load Balancer integration.
And this is becoming more and more important as new architectures become more agile, scale out, containerize, and that type of thing, right?
Exactly, yeah. So application used to be very simple, like I quote simple. It used to be like physical servers, VMs, and so on. And now modern applications are distributed. You may have containers, you may have VMs, obviously, but also physical servers, public cloud, serverless functions. Even GPUs are involved now in application. So it became more and more complex. And so the way you secure and the way you provide access to those applications has also become more complex. And Avi, so the NSX-ALB, bring a lot of answers to that complexity and a lot of additional security.
Okay, all right. Well, let's have a look at how Avi does this.
Yeah. So that's a quick recap of what I just highlighted in 2 minutes. So we have all those increased IT demands. Even lately with COVID-19, we have seen that now we have a lot more remote workers. So the number of applications that needs to be deployed is increasing. And at the same time, the IT is being asked to do more with less. In the past years, and 8 to 10 years, we have automated a lot in terms of compute, in terms of storage, networking, also with NSX, for example. But for like load balancing in general, not just for VMs and containers, it was a little lagging behind, and it was especially not scalable and not flexible because you had those physical boxes, so you cannot combine power for multiple tenants, for example. It's not very scalable because you need to actually rack physical hardware in the infrastructure to provide additional services. And here comes Avi. So just quickly about the architecture. So it's a software-defined load balancing system. So it's a few appliances that you deploy by yourself, which represent the control plane and the management plane. Those are the Avi controller. So it's three appliances that forms the control cluster. And then you have the data plane where you have what they call service engines. Those can be VMs, container, physical servers, depending on your ecosystem. And at the end, they provide app services, so load balancing, obviously, and global load balancing, GCLB, WAF, web application firewall, and container ingress capabilities.
And having, I guess, this centralized management, much like software-defined networking, is going to make it a lot easier to manage applications at a greater scale, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can scale out. You can scale up if you want. It's you can do it while the production is running with no downtime. You can also change service engine if you need. So it's completely elastic. So you can add service engine. You can remove service engine. If you have a burst, so something that you know about before, like before Christmas or before like
Mhm.
a day where you know you will have a lot more visitors on your application. It's also multi-cloud, so you can load balance anything. So if it's bare metal, virtualized, containerized, if it's public cloud, on premises, hybrid, you name it.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess this is you know, kind of front of mind now, especially when you have large companies with, you know, running their quarterly meeting, for example, and suddenly they haven't got everyone in the office. You've got hundreds of people, potentially thousands of people connecting to your systems, haven't you?
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, exactly. And even, I mean, even if you have to scale out because you have a lot more additional traffic or
yeah.
demand. I mean, even the basic service engines that you can have, they can deliver a lot of throughput and a lot of connection.
So am I right in saying that the service engines are way more capable than the old kind of load balancers that we had before in NSX-V?
I would nuance that it's not more capable, it's the way that they are integrated into the ecosystem
Okay.
that brings more benefits because it's completely software defined. If you need more capability, you just click. Uh, you can do it manually, so you can click and click scale out a service engine group, and it will just add additional VMs, additional containers to have more power to deliver the VIP, the virtual service. Or you can even configure it so that it scale out dynamically based on the demand.
And what type of load balancing capabilities are we talking about in terms of the algorithms that are used?
Oh,
A
I
lot.
haven't seen one that is not implemented. I don't know on top
Hmm.
of my head. I can show you in the demo, but it's
It's a lot. Okay, that's cool.
yeah. I can show you in the demo. It will be more self-explanatory.
Okay.
It has one more thing. It has built-in analytics, so it's completely agentless, but you have an end-to-end visibility into the application delivery, into the request. So each requests are logged, and you can see exactly if you have an error where the error sits. So usually someone can just tell you like the application is slow, and we have all know we have all received that kind of statement.
Mm.
But usually you don't know exactly why it's slow. Is it the network? Is it the application server, the database server? Is it like something that is missing from the code? And you have really this built-in analytics that is really helpful for troubleshooting on day two.
So when you're deploying kind of the data plane capabilities, you're deploying those in the remote clouds where they're not deployed and measuring kind of the network connectivity between um, the instance and the server. They're actually deploying in or beside the server. How does that work in a distributed environment? That's what I'm trying to get to. Because when you say measuring and understanding the traffic, there could be a lot of things in the middle which are causing
Yeah.
problems.
The best is that I show you in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Because it will be more like a demo is worth 1,000 slides.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
And also because it's software defined, the last point is that it's API. It's based on an API. So they have an Ansible module, they have a Terraform provider, they have a really powerful API. So you can just consume it as you want.
Brilliant. And in terms of tenancy, how is tenancy handled in Avi?
It's you choose during the deployment of the controller if you want to have like no multi-tenancy in the controller, or if you have to have real multi-tenancy. So multi-tenancy was built in the product from day zero.
Excellent. So when we're offering kind of Terraform tenancy and control in Cloud Director, we can essentially replicate that level of capability here in Avi. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
So it provides you layer 4, layer 7 security, DDoS protection, web application firewall. It's also 100% software defined, so it's completely scalable and distributed. You only deploy once the controller if you want, and then you can connect to all your clouds. That's how they name the ecosystems. It's so the visibility, it's agentless, it's deep analytics, and it's completely multi-cloud and multi-tenant.
So is this something that obviously we're going to talk about Cloud Director in a minute, how it fits in there.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something you would see more as particularly the analytics side, something that service provider would do more as a managed service than as a self-service option?
You can do both. So the next version of VCD 10.2 that will be released soon integrates with NSX-ALB. So the load balancing piece for an NSX-T backed VDC or VDC will be delivered by NSX-ALB.
Yeah.
And we have not integrated all the features because of the Avi product yet in the integration with VCD. We have integrated layer 4 and layer 7 virtual services, and like not all of the round robin mechanism, or like the mechanism to connect to the servers, to the backend servers, and not all the analytics. But a provider can really provide also on the other side, provide this as a managed service with the full protection, web application firewall, troubleshooting, and so on.
Yeah, this is nice. Nice additional service opportunities for service providers I see here.
Yeah. So regarding the integration with VCD, so as the integration with NSX-T, the provider admin has to deploy first the NSX-ALB controller cluster. So it's usually 3 VMs that forms a controller. And then it will connect to the Avi UI, and it will create what they call NSX-T Cloud, where you just provide credentials to NSX-T. So the Avi controller will actually connect to NSX-T and will drive what's required on the NSX-T side. So it's relying on the capability of having Avi talking to NSX-T manager.
Yeah.
And then in VCD, you have to import the NSX-T cloud from Avi to import the service engine groups. And then that's it. Basically, the tenants admin can start delivering virtual services on specific edges. So day zero, you provide, you deploy the NSX-ALB controllers, you do the NSX-T cloud configuration, and then the tenants, they create and configure the virtual services. And what then a lot is automated behind, because in the UI, you just mentioned what you want, but in the backend, what's actually happening is that Avi will talk to NSX-T, it will deploy some service engine in a vCenter, which are VMs. It will connect them to a specific NSX-T segment. NSX-T will automatically route this segment into the tenant, and the VIP will be created, and so on. So a lot is done in the backend and is automated.
And this would be the edge load balancing service.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
One last slide before I switch to the demo. So a big notion of this integration is around the service engine groups. So a service engine group is something that you define in the Avi UI, and it's like the definition of how the service engine will scale, will be available, and also their resource requirements. So you can say that tenant alpha will have a service engine group that will that have an active type. So you will have multiple service engines that are always all are active. And tenant Bravo will have service engines that will have more CPUs, more RAM, and that will be active standby or active plus buffer and so on. So it's really up to you. And you have then two notions. You can import them as shared service engine, so they will be shared amongst multiple edge gateways, or they will be dedicated to a specific edge gateway.
Got it. Okay. And if the VMs within the segments behind the gateway move to a different org VDC, then you're going to need to replicate the service engine group over to the other org VDC. Or can you set that up as a shared service engine group across two org VDCs, and one of them is a redundant connection?
No, because even if the service engine group is shared between two org VDC or two edges, the VIP will not move, the virtual service will not move with the VMs. What you can do is use a data center group and the edge gateway that will be attached to this data center group. So that's a new feature coming also in 10.2, VCD 10.2. And so you can extend the network between all org VDC that belong to that data center group. So even if you move your VMs and your application between the org VDC, they still belong to the same data center group.
So this could be used for disaster recovery and resilient purposes as well.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's great. That's new and very useful.
Yes. So let's switch to the demo. So I have an instance of VCD 10.2 here. I have my Avi controller. So I'll just log in. So that's the default view. And in the application. So you have 5 submenu: the application that you define, operation for everything day 2, templates that you can use, infrastructure, and administration. Administration, it's only for the controllers. Infrastructure is the first step. As I mentioned, you define a cloud. So you define the NSX-T cloud. That's the first thing that the provider has to do after the Avi controllers deployment. And there you actually define how to connect to NSX-T from Avi. So you have some credentials, the transport zone, and that's about it. And also the vCenter configuration.
Okay.
To deploy the service engine. Then you define service engine groups. You always have to select a default the cloud. So the cloud can be it can be a vSphere cloud, it can be AWS, Linux, Azure, GCP. It can be anything. So you can have multiple clouds. So for my main vCenter, I have this cloud outside VCD. For this one, it's NSX-T. So this one I'm using, but I could have one for AWS and so on from the same UI.
That's nice. And that will deploy service engines into those clouds.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if I select my cloud for NSX-T, I have, don't pay attention to the default group, that's always here. You cannot remove it. I created 2 service engine groups, one that is named DED for dedicated and one shared. So in that, I can just define the high availability mode. So if it's active standby, active, buffer, the number of virtual service per service engine, so per AC, per VM, the CPU and memory capacity per service engine, and then a few additional settings that I won't talk here, like the scale and the logs and everything. So that's not actually creating something, that's just a definition.
Is there any kind of best practices or guides around what those numbers should be in terms of scale?
Yes, and everything is quite well explained, described in the Avi documentation.
Okay.
So they mention if you have that kind of, they mention that for each core you can handle that much of traffic and so on.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then you switch to VCD and you have a new menu here, NSX-ALB. So first you have to connect to the controller. From there, you can import what you just created, the NSX-T cloud. And then you can import the service engine groups. So it's when you import one that you define if it's shared or not. So I imported one as shared, so it can be shared between multiple edge gateways,
Mm-hmm.
even if they belong to different tenants. And dedicated, which means that once I assign it to an edge gateway, nobody else will be able to see it or use it, consume it.
What would be the use case for cross-shared for different tenants? I could see a shared use case for the same tenant with different org VDCs. Is there a use case for a shared amongst different tenants?
I have not thought about it, to be honest.
Okay.
We could think about the provider providing like a small type of virtual services with small service engine for everyone. So having multiple, so even if it's shared, the tenants will not see the virtual services from each other. It just means that the capacity inside the service engine will be split between all the edge gateways. And when you import them, you have a way to reserve the virtual services. So when I imported this one into one of the edge gateway, I have reserved 15 out of 100 virtual services of the service engine group.
Right.
And that's where the provider tasks end. And then as a tenant admin, so I'll connect to my tenant portal. As a tenant admin, so here I have 3 org VDC. So OVDC 01 and 02 belong to the same data center group, and OVDC 3 is on its own. So now I have created a VDC group v-VMworld. And in there, I have 2 participating org VDC. And I have assigned one edge, alpha T edge 1. So if I go on that edge, I have general settings. So I already activated, enabled the virtual service. So you have just to enable it. You have to add the service engines, so the service engine group. So if I add it here, it will not be available for any other. So I added this one. And so you see that out of 100, I have reserved, I have decided that I want only 20 virtual services, and I have reserved 5, and I have 1 used.
Wasn't that 15 when you had it?
Yes, because it's also used in a different edge.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I have 5 reserved here, and I have 10 reserved in a different edge.
Got it. Yeah.
And then the next step as a tenant admin is to define the pool of servers. So I have a demo application. So I have 2 members here. So I define it here. And in the pool definition is where the things actually comes to be interesting. So this is what you mentioned before, the load balancing algorithm. So you have a lot. So least connection, round robin, fastest.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with any of those problems. It's been a while.
Yeah, usually with load balancing, you're lucky if you have 4 or 5 of those. I mean, like least connection, round robin, fastest response, and maybe consistent hash are the most obvious, the most common ones. It really depends on the application. You can also define the persistence so that you as a user, you always end in the same backend server, potentially for persistence of the session, persistence of cookie, and so on. So you can define if it's by client IP, cookie, HTTP header, and so on. You can add health monitors. So as this is the first integration, you will not be able to add new health monitors by yourself. In the Avi portal, what the service provider can do is actually create a new one here and assign it from this view directly to the virtual service, to the pool. So you will see it in the pool, but you will not be able to add it by yourself. So you will just be able to delete it. So, but that's only the first integration. We plan to integrate much more of those features in the future.
Yeah, it's much like the layer 7 distributed firewall service specifications, right? They have to be created externally, but then you can import them. Okay.
It's a little different, but yeah, it's the same concept.
Mm-hmm.
And then you define the members. So I define the two IP. So those are my two servers, two web front-end servers. And then SSL settings if you have. So if between the service engine, if the service engine has to talk to the application server in HTTPS, so using an SSL certificate.
Yeah.
But I'm not doing it. Once you have done that, you can just finish and create the virtual service. So I use a demo application named PlaneSpotter. So I created. So it's basically you tell which service engine group you want to use, which pool, the one that we just created, you want to use, the virtual IP associated, and the service type. So here I'm using HTTPS. I have a certificate that I imported. I have port 443. And as I added port 80, there will be an automatic redirect if you do HTTP to HTTPS.
Yeah.
And that's it. And you have nice analytics here. And so if I type, so it's PlaneSpotter. So that's the application. You can retrieve records from the FAA based on a registry number.
Yeah.
And you see that I have the host that delivers the page with the IP. So every time I refresh, because it's round robin, I end in a different server.
Yeah.
And then I can find, my application may be wrong because I did a lot of tests for VMware, but you get the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Can you just repeat for me the step where the provider made the association between, I think it was the shared group and the edge gateway? I didn't see that or quite understand that fast enough.
Sure. So in terms of infrastructure, we have to import the service engine group here, but it's just to have them in VCD so that VCD knows about them. So the provider does that, but you don't have a lot to define. You can just import them, tell if it's shared or not, and indicate how many virtual services.
So if you're providing dedicated ones for each customer, giving them a dedicated edge load balancing function, then here's probably where you'd have a naming convention for the tenant org name.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Yes, exactly. It would be SEG dash alpha dedicated, Bravo dedicated, and so on.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So as a provider admin, you are associating the service engine then with the org VDC.
No, you're just importing them in the system. And then when you create the edge gateway, you associate service engine group here. You can add specific service engine to specific edge.
Yes, that's what I meant. Okay, cool, good. Understood.
So, and that's the integration with VCD, and I will show you a different demo in a minute. In terms of what the service provider will see is you can have really a deep dive on exactly what's happening. So that's the view of my virtual services as a service provider. So that's the VIP. So you have a health score that is associated to every component. So the two backend servers, 10.11 and 10.12, have a health score. That's the pool. That's the VIP, the virtual service, and that's the service engine that currently holds the VIP, the virtual service. So if I dig into specifically that virtual service, I have analytics. So you see that from the client, I have 2 milliseconds to the load balancing, to the VIP, and then the VIP to the server has 3 milliseconds, and then I have 64 milliseconds of application response, and then data transfer. So I can dig exactly, I can check exactly where we have a latency. And you have also in the graph, so that's the past 6 hours, but if I do past day, you also have the system events that are mentioning. So here I have like the little symbol, so I can click on it, and I have exactly what happened at this moment. So yesterday evening, before 10 p.m., the virtual service came up. So that's when I prepared the demo.
So I'm assuming here you can set thresholds and event triggers or alarms to be sent somewhere. Right. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah.
There are a lot of inbuilt things that are really useful. So you have the logs, and by default, it's only displaying significant logs. So where you have errors. So internal answers like 500, 404, and so on. So I can check, and you have also the duration. So if you check the details, so you can see I want everything equal to 500, and then I can expand on the right, and I can see, I can try to exactly like dig into what's the common cause or common problem between all of those. So registry, is it tied to a specific server address? Yes, it's only the 10.11 that provides me that error, and so on. And you can really dig into the problem. I don't have a lot of access to this application because it's a demo and I'm not generating enough traffic, but you get the idea. I mean, if you have thousands of logs and you see that you have the one icon or one image that is missing from one server, you will have 404 errors, HTTP errors, just for that particular service.
So as a provider who will be managing multiple load balancers for customers, is there ways to set high-level thresholds across all load balance virtual services and load balance services?
Yeah, I haven't digged enough into the alerting mechanism. So I know that there are inbuilt alerts that you can find in here. So those are the built alerts, but you can build more alerts and you can define actions.
That's great. And you select which objects, all instances. Yeah, yes. That's great.
If it's based on a virtual service and service engine group, a pool, and so on, you can define the action. And you can have like a syslog or an action in the portal or anything.
That's a good point. Do you know if there's a content pack for vRealize log insight for Avi Networks?
I haven't checked.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
No, don't worry. Just all the providers in the Flex core have vRealize log insight. So.
So the Second demo, I have two VMs in this old VDC. I have one Edge 03, and I have added this shared service engine group. Here it's where I have the 10 additional reserved VIP. And if I create now, so I have two VMs. I have one that is delivering one page and one that is delivering a different page. So it's actually those two VMs. So I have one that is available behind that 161 address. So the name of the server is demo 161, and we have a dog there. And 162, it's the cat. It's the cat with glasses as well.
Okay.
So if I do a new pool for Feature Friday, I do round robin, no persistence. I want an active monitor, HTTP, for example. Default server port is 80. I add two members. So the internal is 168, 30, 161. The internal, and the other one is 162. That's my pool.
Will it take a port by default for web traffic?
No, you're right. If I'm not mistaken with the internal IP. It will come up when I create the virtual service. So here I'm creating a VIP demo, Feature Friday. I select the service engine group where the VIP will be living. So that's where the data path will exist. The pool that we just created. In terms of virtual IP, I want to use, I think it's 165. I want port 80, and then save. We have to give it a moment just to create so what's happening behind. So that's what a tenant admin has to do. So what's happening behind is VCD will talk to Avi. Avi will create the virtual service here. So the new VIP demo Feature Friday is going up. So we can dig here. The pool is, for the moment, is down. May have made an error in the IP.
I think it might be the IP, yeah.
So if I do 39, that's 165. No, it's working. Okay, maybe you need to give it a minute to refresh. So I have now 165, and it's doing round robin between the two.
Yeah.
What I can now is provide SSL, so HTTPS. So I created a Let's Encrypt certificate. And I can add it here. So I changed to HTTPS, and I select this certificate. And I can add a port, maybe port 80. And I created an FQDN, which is animal with glasses. And we have to wait for a minute so that the VIP comes
Yeah,
up.
no problem. I understand.
But you get the idea.
These things take a couple of minutes. That's awesome, absolutely awesome, and pretty quick to do from a tenant's perspective. pretty simple to do. How would the service provider, obviously you've assigned hard assigned 10 VIPs out of the 50. If a tenant wants to increase the number of VIPs, is he able to do that? Or is that something he'd have to go to the service provider and ask?
That's a good question. I've only been involved in the technical aspects of the integration for the moment. I haven't checked all the details with permissions and so on. I would assume that it's the provider admin that defines how many virtual services an edge is able to consume or are reserved. And then the tenant admin will just be able to consume those.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm trying to think how a service provider would charge for this service, whether they would charge per VIP, which is probably the most likely way of doing that. There you go.
So now I have my certificate and I'm load balanced between the two servers.
Awesome. That's a great demo. It's a great demo. It's obvious that there's plenty of power here. Plenty of capability that we're just literally touching on the top here with what we've
Yes.
today. I think this is where when I think about the drive to dev ready cloud and what we're doing, container service extension of App Launchpad and being able to create your own services in App Launchpad now, custom service with Helm charts as well. Actually being able to provision the infrastructure on the fly for the application is going to be one of the really nice aspects that you've got here with like Terraform or Ansible, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, that's great. Is there anything else to see here?
No, those analytics have not filled up because they are pulled every 5 minutes.
All right,
Doing
okay.
the other edge, but if I'm checking in the other edge gateway, I should have analytics. You can have analytics, and you can actually see
There you go. Yeah.
where are the milliseconds spent. If it's on the server side, on the client side.
Yeah.
And you can do the throughput, the open connection, the connection. And you have different timing periods here.
Do you know how much of this is available via the VCD API, or is this something that you'd have to address directly to Avi?
I would have to check. I don't know if we integrated those analytics. No, I think we are pulling them directly from Avi. So VCD is pulling the information from Avi. I have one last comment. I'm using also Avi to provide security and access and load balance between my VCD instances. So I have two VCD deployments, environment A and environment B. One is 10.1, one is 10.2. So I'm using Avi to actually load balance here in that case between my three VCD appliances. And in the 10.2, I only have one because I'm reinstalling constantly to provide access. So I can also enable additional features here. So I can configure, I haven't done it, but I can configure the web application firewall to provide additional security to access the tenant portal of VCD and the API.
Okay, so we did cover the integration with SAML integration and uplift to multi-factor authentication with Active Directory the other day. That's something that we can do in VCD itself. Is there something external we can do here as well?
For authentication, I don't know, but you can protect the request. You can make sure that some IP only access specific portion of the API. You can really do you can really leverage the web application firewall capability to protect your VCD portal.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, that's brilliant. And this, I guess, would be really useful if you're doing multi-site associations, and you're looking at a tenant who's got multiple org VDCs across different geographies, which VCD instance should they come into? Um,
Mhm.
and if you've got a fully qualified domain name here, then you could obviously load balance between
Yes.
your instances. Yeah,
So I'm not doing all of this because that's internal only. I'm accessing
yeah, sure.
private subnet, but I mean, it's the perfect use case to protect the VCD portal.
Yeah, yeah. I think that should be the default use case that all service providers start with.
Yes. And to
Protect.
get familiar with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, Romain, thank you very much. This has been really, really useful. I've certainly learned a lot about Avi that I didn't know before, and I'm really pleased to see the VCD integration is at a starting point with 10.2, but it looks like there's so much more potential that is there, and service providers can really look at expanding their managed service portfolio and really getting closer to the customer applications, which is going to be essentially um, a high priority for customers now.
Yes.
So great opportunity. Thank you so much, Romain, again for your time today and for coming on this Feature Friday.